Hey everyone, I'm Kevin with JcrOffroad. In today's video, we're going to be installing our off-grid cargo floor system in the back of this 2017 JKU. To start off, I laid out kind of everything you should receive here, along with the two main floor panels in the back of our Jeep here. Those do vary just a little bit, so don't expect them to be identical. We'll want to start things off with the three kind of main center rails that you see here in the center of my cart, as well as this front mounting bracket. Now all of these parts are going to be labeled with a part number. You can kind of see it here. Basically the last digit in that number kind of indicates the part itself. So part number 1 will be this mounting bracket I mentioned just a moment ago. You'll then grab the 2s, which are going to be two identical outside rails, as well as number 3, this center rail. Now this center rail number 3 here is not symmetric from end to end, so just make sure that the part number winds up down on the same end as those outside 2. To show you how these bolt to that first bracket, I am going to just get these 2 out of the way temporarily. As far as the mounting hardware you're going to use to assemble this floor frame, it's going to be the same throughout. So you have 1/4 20 button head bolts with washers and flanged locking nuts. So we'll go ahead and get the washers on our bolts. With that, we can then take the bolt and pass it through the back of the mounting bracket here and into that center rail, and then reaching through here, install the nut. I'll flip this over in just a moment so you can get a better look at it on that second bolt. And with it upside down, you can see there really is plenty of room to get in here and install this hardware and assemble the frame, at least until you have it bolted down in the vehicle. As far as the tools you need to assemble this, you mainly need a 5/32 hex. You may want to grab a 7/16 wrench or socket to hold the nut if they're not going to bite into the material too easily, but usually you can just kind of hold those with your finger and tighten these up. It's somewhat beneficial the way we have this laying here with it upside down to get the kind of top mounting surface for your floor panels nice and flat. So assemble this upside down on a flat surface if you can. From here you can repeat that same process now with the number 2 rails in basically just the next set of holes outward on this mounting bracket. Once you have those tight, it should look something like what I have here, and then you can grab actually number 7, which is this rear logo plate. You'll bolt that in using the 6 holes along the back and the same 1/4 20 button head hardware we've been using all along. Just pay attention to this one. It should wind up pretty much flush with the side of this rail over on what will be your passenger side once installed, and then it kind of overhangs out there on the driver's side. Now with this flipped upside down once again, so you can get a little bit better look here, the bolt and nut orientation in these locations is somewhat critical, specifically in the outside hole here, as you will have to get in here later and mark as well as install hardware through that cutout. So you'll want the lower profile bolt out on that end, and then the nut on the inside of these rails. Then once again, kind of pushing these down flat so they're nice and even. You can take your 5/32. Likely you'll need an Allen wrench in here, and you can tighten these up. At this point, you're left with part numbers 6 and 8. Whether or not you install these is going to depend on whether or not your Jeep is equipped with a factory subwoofer in that back passenger corner. So if you do have the subwoofer, you'll leave these out as that subwoofer kind of occupies this space. If you do not have that, you'll need to install these now. So for the main kind of filler plate you see here, you'll be using more 1/4 20 button head hardware through the side here, as well as the side of this rail to get this installed. As for the back bracket, it's just going to mount to the flange here. However, this has pre-installed nuts on both flanges, so you'll just be using 1/4 20 bolts through the flange here and into those pre-installed nuts. So I bolted that filler in since this Jeep is not equipped with that subwoofer, and we now need to kind of get into the back of here and get a couple small things removed before this can be installed. Here in the back of the vehicle, you're going to be removing the nut, bolt, and nut on these 3 rear seat mounting brackets. pay attention to what you're doing here and make sure you're not removing the outer seat belt mounting hardware. And for this, you'll need an 18mm socket. Make sure you retain this factory hardware as you'll use it when installing our floor frame. Next, you'll come back and remove this kind of panel and lid for this rear storage compartment. So that you obviously just flip this up and twist it, and then when you lift up on this, you should be able to slide back, releasing the front of it from its slots, and this can be set off to the side. Now, so that our floor frame can mount nice and tight to the lower body sheet metal down in here, we are gonna have to make a cutout to this plastic section. You can kind of see how I have it marked out here. The way you're gonna do that is measure from the back of this raised rib here. You're gonna come back 1.5 inches, and then over about 2 3/4. And then basically you're just making and marking out a rectangle like I have here. We did kind of cut off, it's probably a little hard to see there, but this back corner so that it doesn't come down to a full 90 just because of the way this radius comes down, and our floor frame is not going to wrap the corner like this plastic does. Now this process is the same over here on the driver's side. So again, I'm going to come out to 2 3/4. I'll make a line kind of following the back edge of this raised section, and again back 1.5 inches over here. I will point out this is all going to be pretty much hidden once the floor frame is installed, so you can be kind of as critical or as loose as you wish here. As you'll kind of see, I'm just freehanding this as parallel as possible to our first line. Again, I'm just going to carry this line back and then kind of cut that off down here in this radius. That last step really could be done in here or out on the bench, but now we can lift this out of the vehicle and we'll kind of cut those sections out on our bench. Now there's a lot of different ways you can cut this plastic, so kind of use your judgment and the tools available to you. But as an example, we're going to be using our air saw, our body saw that we have here in the shop, as well as a cutoff wheel if needed. And one kind of tip that you can use to kind of get nice radiuses in your corners is just take a drill bit and kind of drill just inside of your line there, maybe a 1/4 inch or 3/8 diameter bit as an example, and then just cut your straight lines into that, and that'll kind of help you out there. Other than that, it's just a matter of tracing out the lines with your saw or your cutting device that you had already marked out on your plastic. With both of our cutouts made here, we can then reinstall this into the vehicle. You can then grab your floor frame and get it kind of loosely installed, starting with those seat mounting studs in the mounting tabs out here. With this kind of loosely in place here, you want to at least start the 3 front fasteners so we have it located as accurately as possible. Then we're going to be marking to drill our 2 rear mounting holes and install nutserts in those locations. So take your marker, again with that front hardware in place, check the side-to-side adjustment of your frame here, kind of just making sure it's even between the 2 outer plastic panels, and then just hold down on the back of it so that it's not going to move or wiggle side to side, and then you'll reach into these cutouts and mark the 2 mounting holes through the brackets down here. We'll then remove this one last time so that we can get those rib nuts installed. Now I flipped this over one more time here to hopefully just clarify some things and prevent any confusion. Obviously you will see on those mounts where you're marking the holes that there are 2 mounting holes in that bracket. That is just so that these can be a mirrored part and work on either side of this frame, and we are in fact just using the outer mounting holes to secure this to the floor of your vehicle. So that's why you only see the 1 cutout in this back panel here. With the frame back out of the way, you can now see those marks that were made down here on the tub, so you should just have a couple of small round holes. Anywhere you're going to drill, you obviously want to start with a center punch. I have a spring punch here, but a conventional punch with a hammer would work just fine. So you'll center punch these. In these locations, you're going to be drilling this out to accept a 5/16 nutsert or riv nut. To do that, you got to get all the way up to a 17/32 drill bit, but you don't want to start with this large size bit. So for example, here I have an 1/8 inch bit. This is what we're going to start with as our pilot hole and kind of work our way up. If you have a step bit or a unibit like I have here, this will get you all the way typically to about a 1/2 inch, and then from there you can finish it off with that 17/32 bit. So with that being said, and our center punch already kind of marked out on here, I'll take our 1/8 inch bit and drill our pilot hole. Then, like I mentioned, I'll use our step bit. If you don't have one of these, you can just step up with multiple conventional twist drills as well and achieve the same result. Now with our 17/32 drill, we can finish out this hole, kind of being as cautious as possible here, not to tear out any of this thin sheet metal. Once you finish that out with that 17/32, just grab your riv nut, kind of press it into that hole and make sure that it fits, but hopefully is also a little bit snug like we have there. That way you know it's going to grip well once fully installed. After that, just kind of clean up the metal shavings you have here and also drill your hole on the other side. Now your nutsert tool should come kind of in its own small bag in your hardware pack. In the event that it is not already assembled like you see it here, we'll kind of just run through it real quick. So it's going to be a 5/16 bolt followed by a washer, this kind of large oversized nut, another washer, and then you thread on the riv nut or nutsert here before installing it into your drilled hole. Since we're installing these in a location that now goes kind of out or exits the vehicle, we do recommend a little bit of RTV sealant around the outside of this riv nut. Doesn't have to be a whole lot, but just enough that it kind of seals that up and also helps protect where you now exposed a little bit of that metal surface when drilling through the paint. Then you can install this into the hole. Any mess that's made can kind of be cleaned up after the fact here. At this point, you'll need an 11/16 wrench to hold kind of the oversized nut here in the middle, and then a 1/2 inch socket to turn the bolt here in the center. You'll be holding the wrench and then turning the bolt with your ratchet to compress that riv nut against the sheet metal. Now you should kind of feel that as it starts to tighten up. At that point, you do have to use a little bit of your judgment and discretion to not over tighten these and potentially damage the threads in that nutsert. But you want to make sure also that it's tight against that sheet metal so that it's not going to rotate once you remove this bolt and install your final hardware. We can then back this off, remove all our installation tool, and redo that kind of same process over on the other side. Here is just a quick look at one of these properly installed once we have the kind of extra RTV cleaned up. As an additional kind of word of caution, you could go underneath, since we did kind of expose that metal and cut through the paint, and either seal that up with some additional RTV down there or a little bit of touch-up paint. Now we're going to install this floor frame for the final time. So by now you're pretty familiar with that front mounting hardware, so we'll line it up on the studs and get these installed. With that forward mounting hardware still loose, you can now find the 5/16 by 1 inch long hex bolts like you see here, along with a washer. These are going to go into those cutouts down into the riv nuts that we just installed. You should have some access underneath to kind of help guide this in. And then you'll use a 1/2 inch socket to kind of both start that and tighten them in place. With these two tight, we'll now go back up front again with our 18 and tighten up that forward mounting hardware. So with that floor frame tight in the vehicle, we can now grab our floor panels and work on getting those installed. Obviously, they are just a little bit different, as I think we mentioned earlier on. The one with the cutout is for that factory subwoofer if you're equipped with it over on the passenger side. So I'll get this one out of the way real quick and just set it in the vehicle. Now before you bolt yours down in, you do kind of need to have an idea of which accessories you're planning to install. Ideally, you have those accessories already purchased and with you at the time you're installing this floor, so you can install the provided nut tabs that go along with those so that you have all the hardware in place to get them secured to this floor platform. So the general principle here is we provide you with nut tabs that have pre-installed nuts on the bottom side so that they can be mounted to these floor platforms, and you'll use those to secure the accessories. Now that can vary quite a bit as far as the orientation of these nut tabs and where you're bolting the individual accessories, depending on if you're running side-by-side drawers, if you want to run a fridge slide and drawers, or kind of swap those and put the fridge on driver's side versus passenger side, and so on. So for that, we're going to provide you with a detailed PDF document on the webpage where you would purchase this floor. So look for that link. That should have a detailed diagram as to kind of how you're going to lay these out, but I will show you in this video the general process of how these get installed to the panels. So they're really only going to install to the floor panels in a couple different locations. So you're looking for the holes that line up with the hole spacing on the nut tab. Generally speaking, you'll slide the nut tab underneath the panel like so. You can then temporarily install one of your button head bolts into that pre-threaded kind of pre-installed nut, and then using a bolt and a nut on the other side, you can secure this tab to the floor. You'll then tighten the bolt into the nut. Following that, you can remove that first bolt, as that was really just there to kind of hold and locate the tab, as well as keep it aligned with the slotted hole here in the panel. So at the time of filming this video, I'm not actually installing accessories along with this floor, so I'm not going to fill this whole thing up with a bunch of nut tabs. Again, that PDF document on the webpage is going to be your resource there for locating those. At that time, once you have those installed and you kind of know where you're going with your accessories, we can get this up in the back of the vehicle as well. Nothing too critical here. You already know where the passenger side panel is going to go and kind of how it orients due to that subwoofer cutout. So this one, you just want to get it in with the part number cutout toward the front of the vehicle, and then these holes over on this side actually right now that are closest to the edge, I got to flip this over and are going to go in toward the center here. But really, that should only install one way, so it's pretty easy to figure out. To identify the locations that you're installing hardware to secure these floor panels, you'll need to do a couple things. One, and kind of the easiest thing, is just to look for the pre-installed nuts in the floor frame that we installed earlier on. Your 1/4-20 button head hardware should just thread right through the panel and into those. The only part where this gets a little bit tricky and you need to kind of pay attention as well as know what's going on with the accessories you're installing is where the two panels meet in the center right here, as some of the accessory configurations are going to use these hole locations as well for mounting. So some of your drawers, for example, you'll need to have in place, then install your bolt through the drawer, through the panel, and into the floor frame. But again, at this time, we're just securing the panels. So we'll bolt this down with our button head hardware. The The only locations that you need to secure the floor panel but are not going to have those pre-installed nuts into the floor frame is right at the forward edge on each panel. So you're going to have 6 holes up along here that you'll have to reach over this front edge and install one of your serrated flange nuts along with a bolt and washer in those locations. Now, one final tip to kind of help you when installing these and getting everything lined up is to start all of your hardware by hand. Leave all of this just a little bit loose, and that should allow you kind of just a little bit of adjustment to manipulate the floor panels and get everything aligned before coming back right at the end and tightening everything up with your 5/32 hex. Now, one small but important tip to kind of help you along the way with alignment and hardware installation is just to start everything by hand. That should help you out with getting all of your mounting hardware aligned. It'll give you just a little bit of adjustability in the panels as you're getting that hardware and even some of the accessories installed. And then once all of that hardware is in place, you can come back with that 5/32 and tighten everything up. Once you have all that hardware started and then tightened in here, the only thing left to do is install your individual accessories. So again, for more information on those, always check out the individual product page where you purchase those accessories, as well as the PDF install docs on our page. If you still have any questions or have any questions at all about any JCR product, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can always send us an email at info@JcrOffroad.com or call us at 269-353-1184.